My parents kicked me and my kids out of Thanksgiving dinner, so I stopped paying their mortgage, and they panicked. Hey everyone, before we get started, do me a favor, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. It really helps the channel out since barely anyone watches until the end, and the algorithm hates me lately. Alright, let's get into it. Hi Reddit. So, against my better judgment, I decided to go to my parents' holiday dinner. I know, bad idea. But my younger brother Nick spent weeks convincing me that things would be different this time, that our parents had changed, that maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see me as something other than a massive disappointment. For context, I'm Adam, 35, a financial consultant. I've been happily married to Sophia, 33, for nearly 12 years, and we have two amazing kids, Liam, 10, and Emma, 7. Plus, Sophia is pregnant with our third. Life is good, stable, happy. Well, everywhere except with my family. See, I made the cardinal sin of not becoming a lawyer. My dad, grandfather, and great-grandfather were all attorneys. My little brother Nick followed the path, became a hotshot corporate lawyer, and he's the golden child. I committed the ultimate crime. I followed my passion and built my own successful career outside of the family business. And for that, I've been treated like an outcast for as long as I can remember. Every single family gathering has been the same: backhanded comments, passive-aggressive digs, and endless comparisons to Nick. It's always, "Nick just made partner. Isn't that wonderful?" Nick's firm handled this high-profile case. Did you see it in the news? Meanwhile, I could land a multi-million-dollar client, and the most I'd get is, "Oh, that's nice," if I'm lucky. So, why did I agree to this dinner? Call it stupid optimism or the fact that I wanted my kids to have some semblance of a relationship with their grandparents. But, mostly, it was Nick. He swore that Dad had come around, and that Mom missed me. He said they wanted to make amends. So, against every warning bell in my head, I gave in. We arrived at my parents' house, and for the first 10 minutes, things actually seemed okay. Mom greeted the kids with enthusiasm. Dad even nodded at me, and I thought, maybe Nick was right. That hope lasted all of 5 minutes. It started small, little things. My dad barely acknowledging me, brushing past me to talk to Nick about some case he was working on. My mom's, "Oh, dear, you've put on a little weight, haven't you?" to Sophia, who is literally pregnant. Then came the comments about my job. "You still doing that finance thing, Adam?" my dad asked, swirling his whiskey. "You know, if you ever want a real career, we could find a spot for you at the firm." Real career. Right. Never mind that I make more than Nick. Never mind that I have built something for myself that I'm proud of. I forced a smile. "Thanks, Dad, but I think I'll stick to my fake career." Nick shot me a look, silently pleading with me not to start anything. But then it got worse. We sat down to dinner, and Dad, of course, made a toast. To family, he said. To hard work and success. And to Nick, who continues to make us proud every day. Nick. Just Nick. Not a single word about me or my family. Sophia squeezed my hand under the table. But then my mom, sweet, oblivious as ever, turned to Liam and said, "So, sweetheart, have you thought about what you want to be when you grow up? Maybe a lawyer, like Grandpa and Uncle Nick?" Liam hesitated and then, God bless him, said, "No, I want to do what my dad does." You'd think he had just announced he wanted to rob banks for a living with the way my father scoffed. Well, he said, chuckling. "You'll learn as you get older." I saw red, but I kept my mouth shut. I told myself to get through dinner. But then they brought up the baby. Mom turned to Sophia, all fake smiles. "So, darling, do you know what you're having yet?" "A boy," Sophia said, beaming. Mom's smile faltered. "Oh," she said, like she had just been told someone died. "Well, I suppose that's nice. Another boy. Maybe he'll be the lawyer in the family." I snapped. "Or maybe he'll grow up happy, knowing he has parents who love him no matter what career he chooses." Silence. Nick put his head in his hands. Dad set down his fork. Mom looked wounded, like I had just slapped her across the face. "Adam," Dad said, voice low. "Don't start." "Start." I laughed, shaking my head. "Dad, you never even acknowledge my work. You treat me like a failure even though I make more money than Nick. And now you're trying to make my kids feel like they only matter if they follow some pre-approved path? I'm done." Mom gasped. "We were just making conversation." "No," I said, standing up. "You were being condescending, like always." I turned to Sophia. "Let's go." And just like that, we left. No dramatic storming out. No yelling. Just quiet, absolute finality. Nick called me later that night, apologizing. He said he really thought things would be different. But I told him I was done trying. I was done being the black sheep. Done setting myself up for disappointment. My family is the one I've built with Sophia and my kids. That's all that matters. And you know what? I don't regret it. Not for a second. Adam arrived at his parents' house with Liam and Emma. His wife Sophia stayed home because she was in labor. Upon entering the house, he immediately felt the tension. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken resentment. The dining room was beautifully decorated, every piece of silverware polished to perfection, the table set with expensive china, candles flickering in an elegant display. But there was one glaring problem. There were no seats for him or the children. His father, George, didn't even try to hide his discontent. "Why did you come?" "We didn't invite you," he said flatly, his eyes narrowing as he set down his wine glass. The room fell into an uneasy silence, the rest of the family exchanging awkward glances but saying nothing. Adam felt his jaw tighten, his hands instinctively resting on Liam's and Emma's shoulders. "Sophia is in labor. I thought it would be good for the kids to be here, to spend time with family while we wait." His mother, Evelyn, forced a smile, but it was strained. "Oh, that's lovely, dear. But you should have called first. We only prepared for the usual number." Adam glanced at the long table, filled with more food than anyone there could possibly eat. "Right? Because there's definitely not enough to go around." Nick, sitting near the end of the table, rubbed his temples. "Adam, maybe we should step outside for a moment." "No," Adam said firmly, his voice calm but unwavering. "I just want to understand. You say you want us here. You say you want to be involved. And yet, the second I walk in, I feel like an intruder." George sighed heavily and shook his head. "This is a family gathering, Adam. You never commit. You always make a scene. Frankly, we assumed you wouldn't come. And yet, here I am, with your grandchildren, who, by the way, shouldn't be made to feel like they're unwelcome." Emma clutched at his sleeve, her wide eyes filled with confusion. "Daddy, where do we sit?" Evelyn pursed her lips. "We can pull up a few chairs, I suppose." "Don't bother," Adam said, his patience running thin. "Come on, kids. Let's go." "Oh, Adam, don't be so dramatic," Evelyn huffed. "We just weren't expecting you, that's all." He turned back, meeting his father's gaze head-on. "That's exactly the problem, isn't it? You never expect me. You never consider me. And you sure as hell never make room for me." With that, he took Liam and Emma's hands and walked out the door, leaving the holiday dinner behind. Adam drove in silence, gripping the wheel tightly as he glanced at Liam and Emma through the rearview mirror. Liam was staring out the window, his brows furrowed in thought, while Emma clutched her stuffed rabbit, her lower lip trembling. He could feel the weight of their confusion pressing down on him. They didn't understand why their own grandparents had treated them like they didn't belong. And honestly, neither did he. "Daddy." Emma's voice was small, hesitant. "Yeah, sweetheart." Adam softened his tone, trying to push down the anger that was still boiling inside him. "Did we do something bad?" she asked, her big eyes meeting his in the mirror. Adam's heart clenched. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. None of this is your fault." Liam finally spoke, his voice more controlled but filled with frustration. "Then why didn't they want us there? There was plenty of food, plenty of chairs in the other room. They just didn't want to make space for us." Adam sighed, tightening his grip on the wheel. Sometimes, people get so stuck in their own way of thinking that they don't realize how much they hurt others. It doesn't make it right, and it sure as hell doesn't make sense, but that's on them, not us. Liam crossed his arms, staring out the window again. "I don't think they even like us." Adam didn't know how to answer that. Instead, he focused on driving, each mile putting more distance between them and the house filled with cold indifference. His phone buzzed in the passenger seat. A quick glance told him it was Nick. He ignored it. By the time they pulled into their driveway, Adam was exhausted, not just from the drive, but from everything. He had tried for so many years to make things work with his family, to bridge the gap they had created, but tonight had made one thing clear: there was no bridge. There never had been. The second they walked into the house, Sophia let out a sharp breath of relief. She was sitting on the couch, her hands cradling her belly. "Thank God. I was worried." Adam leaned down to kiss her forehead. "How are you feeling?" She exhaled slowly. "Better now that you're home." Liam and Emma rushed to her side, Emma climbing onto the couch while Liam stood by her knee. "Are you okay, Mommy?" Emma asked softly. Sophia smiled and ran a hand through her daughter's hair. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I was just resting." Adam sat beside her, rubbing his temples. "We didn't stay long." Sophia frowned. "That bad?" He let out a humorless chuckle. "They didn't even have seats for us. Told us to eat in the kitchen." Victoria sat there grinning like she was enjoying the whole thing while Brian drowned himself in cheap whiskey. Sophia shook her head in disbelief. "Unbelievable. They didn't want us there, sophomore. And I think it's time I finally accept that." She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "I hate that they made you feel like this. That they made our kids feel like this." Adam looked at Liam, who was still standing stiffly by the couch. He knew this had gotten to him. He wasn't a little boy anymore. He was 10 years old, old enough to recognize when people were treating him differently, when he wasn't wanted. They don't get to ruin our night, Adam said firmly, shifting his focus. We'll make our own dinner. A real one. Together. Sophia smiled, though her eyes were still full of concern. That sounds perfect. The four of them made their way into the kitchen, and despite everything that had happened, the warmth of home settled around them. Adam watched as Liam set the table, making sure everyone had a seat, and Emma giggled as she tried to help Sophia stir the mashed potatoes. This was what mattered. Not the cold stares and empty gestures of his parents. Not the weight of a family that had never truly accepted him. This, right here, his family, the one he had built. And for the first time in a long time, Adam realized he didn't need the other one at all. The next morning, Adam was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at his phone. His call log was filled with missed calls from Nick, his mother, and even a single message from his father, which simply read, "Call me." He didn't. He knew exactly what they wanted. It wasn't an apology. It was damage control. A part of him was still fuming from the previous night, but another part of him felt something else, relief. For the first time, he saw things clearly. It had never been about family. It had never been about love. His presence had only ever been tolerated because of what he provided. His success, his financial stability, his willingness to step in whenever things went sideways for one of them. That was his value to them. Nothing more. And he was done playing that role. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Victoria. He exhaled sharply before answering. "What do you want?" "Oh, don't be like that," she said, her voice annoyingly smooth, as if nothing had happened. "You made quite the exit last night." "Did I?" Adam said, swirling the coffee in his cup. "I thought I was just making space, since clearly there wasn't any for me or my kids." Victoria scoffed. "Oh, come on. You always exaggerate." Adam leaned back in his chair, his voice turning cold. "Do I? Tell me something, Victoria. Are you the new favorite now?" She hesitated just a second too long before saying, "Don't be ridiculous." "That's what I thought," he muttered. "Well, that works out, doesn't it? Since you don't need anything, I guess I don't have to help with your mortgage anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. He could practically hear the gears turning in her head the moment she realized what he was saying. "You wouldn't do that," she said, but there was an edge to her voice now. Adam smiled to himself. "Wouldn't I? What was it you said? You don't need anything, right?" "Adam," she started, but he cut her off. "I helped you out because I thought we were family. But family doesn't make you feel like an outsider at your own parents' table. Family doesn't look at your kids like they don't belong. So, if I'm not family to you, then you're not family to me. And that means you're on your own." The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. Somewhere in the background, he could hear the slow drip of the kitchen faucet, an odd contrast to the storm brewing on the other end of the line. Finally, Victoria spoke again, her voice lower now, lacking its usual arrogance. "You're really doing this?" Adam closed his eyes for a moment, letting the finality of his decision sink in. "Yeah, I am." He hung up before she could say anything else. For the first time in years, he felt free. Adam sat at the kitchen table, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the surface as he stared at his phone. He could already imagine what was happening at his parents' house. His mother pacing the floor, his father sitting stiffly in his chair, probably nursing a drink, and Victoria trying to figure out how to spin this in her favor. They weren't panicking because they had lost him as a son or his children as their grandchildren. No, they were panicking because they had lost their financial safety net. For the past 3 years, Adam had been sending them $800 a month to cover the mortgage. When they couldn't pay the house taxes, he had wired them $4,000 without hesitation. When the roof needed urgent repairs, he had covered another $5,000. And not once, not a single time, had any of them ever thanked him. They had taken it as a given, as though it were his obligation. And for years, he had convinced himself that it was simply his responsibility to support them because, despite everything, they were his family. But last night had changed everything. The phone rang again. His mother this time. He let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. He sighed and answered, his tone already clipped. "What do you want?" There was no pretense of casual conversation this time. His mother's voice was sharp with disbelief. But you can't just stop helping." Adam felt an eerie sense of calm settle over him. "Yes, I can." The silence on the other end of the line was so absolute that for a moment, he thought she had hung up. Then he heard her sharp inhale, the telltale sign of a woman who was used to controlling the conversation, used to getting what she wanted. "Adam," she started again, her voice softer now, more measured, as though she could smooth this over, as though she could make him see reason. "You know how much we've relied on that support. We have expenses, I don't care," he interrupted. "I really don't." Her breath hitched. "We're your parents." "No," Adam said, his voice calm but firm. You are two people who have made it very clear that I do not belong in your family. You have excluded me, belittled me, and made my children feel like strangers in your home. You want my money, but you don't want me. That's not how this works. We raised you. She snapped, her patience finally cracking. And I repaid you. Over and over again, Adam said, his voice growing colder. But it was never about gratitude, was it? It was just about what I could give you. His mother sputtered, trying to regain control of the conversation, but he was done. I hope Victoria enjoys being the favorite, he said, because she can figure out how to pay for the house now. He didn't wait for her response. He hung up, turned off his phone, and exhaled. Liam and Emma were sitting at the table, quietly watching him, their eyes wide with something between confusion and admiration. Sophia, still resting on the couch, gave him a small, knowing smile. He stood up, walked over to his children, and took their hands in his. Come on, he said. Let's go make breakfast. And just like that, he walked away from the weight of obligation, away from a family that had never truly valued him. He was done, and for the first time in his life, he felt completely free. Later that evening, Adam stood outside on the back porch, letting the cold air clear his thoughts. The past 24 hours had been a whirlwind, and despite the initial anger that had fueled his decisions, what remained now was a quiet, unwavering certainty. He had done the right thing. The sound of hesitant footsteps behind him made him turn. Nick stood there, hands shoved deep into his pockets, his usual confidence replaced with something unfamiliar, shame. I didn't think they would do that, Nick said quietly, his voice barely carrying over the night air. Adam studied him for a moment, searching for any hint of the older brother he had grown up with, the one who had always been caught in the middle, the one who had benefited from being the golden child but had never been malicious about it. He looked genuinely remorseful, but it didn't matter. It's not your fault, Adam finally said, his tone calm, final. Nick exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I should have said something. Adam let out a humorless chuckle. Would it have changed anything? Nick didn't answer. That was all the confirmation Adam needed. Without another word, he turned and walked back inside, leaving Nick standing alone in the cold. When Adam walked back inside, the warmth of his home enveloped him, a stark contrast to the cold, empty feeling he had left behind at his parents' house. He found Sophia sitting on the couch, her hand resting gently on her belly, her eyes filled with quiet concern. Liam and Emma were curled up beside her, their small faces still carrying traces of the confusion and hurt from earlier. He sat down next to her, taking a deep breath before telling her everything. He didn't soften the details, didn't downplay the way they had been treated, didn't hold back the finality of what had happened. He told her about the moment he realized he was nothing more than a wallet to them, about his mother's disbelief when he cut them off, about Nick's weak attempt at an apology that changed absolutely nothing. Sophia listened in silence, her expression hardening with every word. When he finished, she didn't hesitate. They are no longer our family, she said firmly. Not in any way that matters. Adam exhaled, feeling a strange sense of relief at hearing her say it out loud. He had spent years trying to be part of something that had never truly included him. Now he was done. Instead of the fancy holiday dinner they had originally planned to attend, they did something better. They ordered pizza, pulled out blankets, and turned on one of the kids' favorite cartoons. Liam and Emma quickly forgot about the evening's earlier tension, giggling through mouthfuls of pepperoni pizza, their small hands sticky with cheese. Adam sat there with Sophia, her head resting against his shoulder, as they watched their children laugh. The love, the warmth, the ease of being together, it was everything a family was supposed to be. And in that moment, he knew, without a shred of doubt, that they had made the right choice. For the next week, Adam ignored every single call. His phone lit up constantly with his parents' numbers, alternating between his mother, his father, and even Victoria. At first, the voicemails were filled with indignation, their voices dripping with condescension and barely restrained fury. His mother's sharp tone came through one message. So this is how you treat your family? After all we've done for you? His father's was short and clipped. You're being childish. Call your mother. When anger didn't work, they moved on to guilt. His mother left another message, her voice softer, more controlled, the kind she used when she wanted something. Adam, sweetheart, I know you're upset, but family takes care of each other. You wouldn't really abandon us, would you? Then, the panic set in. Adam, please. His mother's voice cracked in the next voicemail. We can't pay the mortgage. Your father's pension doesn't cover everything, and the bank is already calling. You can't just leave us like this. Victoria tried too, her message laced with irritation and desperation. Look, I know you're mad, but you're taking this too far. Do you really want Mom and Dad to lose the house? Adam listened to each voicemail without reacting, then deleted them one by one. For years, They had expected him to be their safety net, their solution to every financial problem, their reliable source of income whenever they needed it. And they had never once considered how that affected him, never once thought to appreciate what he had done. Now, they were learning what life looked like without him. And for the first time, Adam didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. 2 weeks passed before Adam heard from Nick again. But this time, it wasn't through a phone call or a voicemail. It was a knock at his front door. Adam opened it to find his brother standing there, looking unusually uncomfortable. Nick had always carried himself with the effortless confidence of someone who had never known real consequences. But tonight, he looked drained. "What do you want?" Adam asked, leaning against the doorframe. Nick hesitated before sighing. "Victoria lost her job." Adam raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "And?" Nick rubbed the back of his neck. "She's broke. Mom and Dad can't cover the mortgage without her income, and with you cutting them off, they're in serious trouble." Adam let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "What terrible bad luck." Nick's jaw tightened. "Adam, come on. This is serious." "So is financial responsibility," Adam replied smoothly. "Maybe she should have thought about that before treating me like a second-class citizen while happily taking my money." Nick exhaled sharply. "Look, I know things got bad, but—" "No, Nick," Adam cut him off, his voice calm but firm. "You don't get to show up here and act like I'm the problem. I gave them years of support, and they never once treated me like family. Now that their golden child is broke and they're out of options, they suddenly remember my number." Nick said nothing. "I told them they were on their own," Adam continued. "And I meant it." Nick looked down, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he didn't argue. He knew Adam was right. After a long silence, Adam shrugged. "Good luck with all that." Then, without another word, he shut the door. A few more weeks passed, and for the first time in his life, Adam felt truly free from the weight of his family's expectations. But the calls didn't stop. His mother tried daily, leaving voicemail after voicemail, each one growing more desperate than the last. At first, they were about money. Then, they became about Victoria. Now, they had turned into full-blown panic. Then, late one evening, his phone rang again. He glanced at the screen and sighed. His mother. Again. He let it go to voicemail, expecting another plea for financial help. But this time, her voice was different, frantic, broken. "Adam," she sobbed. "Your father is in the hospital. His blood pressure, it got too high. The doctor said it was stress. Please, we need help. I don't know what to do." Adam sat there for a moment, staring at the phone. He should have felt something, guilt, sympathy, even the instinct to step in and fix things the way he always had. But there was nothing, just exhaustion from the endless cycle of their demands. He picked up the phone and finally called her back. The second she answered, she was already crying. "Adam, thank God. We need you. We need help." His voice was calm, unwavering. "You already have help, Mom." She sniffled. "What? What do you mean?" Adam leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You have Victoria, your favorite daughter. She can handle it." Silence. For the first time, his mother had nothing to say. And for the first time, Adam felt nothing but peace as he hung up the phone. A few days later, there was another knock at Adam's door. He already knew who it was before he even opened it. Nick stood on the porch, looking tired, his face drawn with stress. There was no pretense this time, no fake small talk. He got straight to the point. "Victoria made a deal," he said, his voice heavy. "But she has to pay back $75,000. And Mom and Dad, they're going to lose the house." Adam nodded, letting the words settle between them. He waited for the usual plea, the desperate attempt to manipulate him into stepping in. But Nick didn't say anything else. He just stood there, watching, waiting. "Their problems are not mine," Adam said simply. Nick let out a breath, something between frustration and acceptance. "I figured you'd say that." Adam shrugged. "I meant what I said, Nick. I'm done." Nick studied him for a long moment. "You really don't feel anything?" And for the first time, Adam realized the answer. No, he didn't. Not anger, not guilt, not even satisfaction. Just an overwhelming sense of peace. "Only relief," he admitted. Nick gave a slow nod, as if finally understanding that there was no fixing this, no going back. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Adam watched him go, then shut the door. And just like that, it was over. 2 months had passed since Adam cut off all contact with his parents. In that time, life had settled into something he hadn't known in years, true peace. He spent his days focused on his family, working without the looming expectation of financial burdens that weren't his, and enjoying the quiet knowledge that he no longer owed anyone anything. The weight of obligation had lifted, and for the first time, he was truly free. But peace never lasted long when it came to his family. One morning, just as he was stepping outside to grab the mail, a man in a suit approached him. "Adam Carter?" the man asked, holding out an envelope. Adam took it, already knowing it wasn't good news. He opened it on the spot and felt his stomach twist as he read the contents. It was a summons. His parents were suing him. The claim? Unlawful termination of financial support. The accusation was almost laughable, but there it was, spelled out in legal terms. His parents were claiming that he had verbally agreed to provide them with ongoing financial support and that his sudden irresponsibility had caused them undue financial hardship. They were demanding compensation for the missed mortgage payments, Victoria's debts, and the general loss of the lifestyle they had enjoyed with his contributions. Adam scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief. It was pure desperation, a pathetic last-ditch effort to wring something out of him after realizing he was no longer playing their game. But what surprised him wasn't that they had done this. It was that they had actually found a lawyer willing to take the case. Someone had convinced them that this ridiculous lawsuit had merit, or at the very least, that it could be dragged out long enough to financially exhaust him into settling. He stepped back inside, closing the door behind him as Sophia looked up from the couch, cradling their newborn son. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately sensing the shift in his mood. Adam let out a dry chuckle, tossing the papers onto the counter. "They're suing me." Sophia blinked. "What?" "For cutting off financial support," Adam said, still in disbelief as he ran a hand down his face. "They're actually trying to claim that I was legally obligated to keep paying for their mess." Sophia stared at him for a long moment before shaking her head in disgust. "They really don't know when to quit." "No, they don't," Adam agreed, exhaling slowly. But there was no panic in his voice, no fear, just annoyance. But this time, they're going to learn the hard way. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he needed. It was time to fight back. Adam wasn't about to sit back and let his parents manipulate him through the legal system. If they wanted to drag him into a fight, they were going to regret it. Within hours of receiving the lawsuit, he was on the phone with Andrew Collins, one of the most respected attorneys in town. Collins was known for his ruthless efficiency in litigation, a man who didn't just win cases, he buried his opponents. They met the next morning in Collins' sleek downtown office, where Adam handed over the lawsuit documents. Collins flipped through them quickly, his expression unreadable, before finally letting out a short laugh. "This is one of the most ridiculous claims I've ever seen," he said, shaking his head. "They're not suing you because they think they'll win. They're suing you because they assume you'll cave under pressure." Adam leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "So they're using the court system to blackmail me." "Exactly," Collins confirmed. "They don't care about the actual case. Their goal is to squeeze a settlement out of you before this even reaches a courtroom. They assume you'd rather pay them off than deal with the headache of a prolonged legal battle and the publicity that comes with it." Adam exhaled slowly, nodding. "And what do you suggest?" Collins smiled, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "We don't give them a damn thing." Adam smirked. "I like that plan." "Good," Collins said. "First things first, we'll file a motion to dismiss on the grounds that there was never a legally binding agreement for financial support. They have no case. And if they want to push forward, we countersue for legal fees and damages for a frivolous lawsuit. That'll make them think twice about wasting any more time and money." Adam nodded, feeling a sense of satisfaction settle over him. "And what about the public angle? I wouldn't put it past them to go to the media with some sob story." Collins waved a hand dismissively. "Let them. If they try to drag this into the public eye, we hit back harder. The second they make this messy, we expose the real story. How they used you as a personal bank for years, how they discarded you the moment they didn't need you anymore, and how they're now trying to extort you through the legal system." Adam felt something he hadn't felt in a long time when it came to his parents. Control. "Let's do it," he said firmly. Collins nodded. They wanted a war. They just got one. The first hearing was a spectacle, just as Adam had expected. His parents walked into the courtroom looking like broken, frail victims, their postures hunched, their faces carefully composed to evoke sympathy. His mother clutched a tissue in her trembling hands, her eyes already red as if she had been crying for hours. His father walked slower than usual, occasionally pressing a hand to his chest, subtly hinting at his supposed deteriorating health. The performance began the moment they were called to speak. His mother's voice wavered as she told the judge about their hopelessness, how they had sacrificed everything for their son, only to be cruelly abandoned when they needed him most. Tears streamed down her face as she described their financial ruin, their struggle to keep a roof over their heads, their fear of losing everything. His father played his part well, sighing deeply, shaking his head as if the betrayal was too much to bear. "I never thought my own son would turn his back on us," he said, his voice heavy with supposed grief. "We are old. We are struggling." And he just walked away. Adam sat quietly, his face expressionless, but inside he was seething. Not because their words hurt, but because they had the audacity to stand there and lie so effortlessly. They had twisted the truth into something unrecognizable, painting themselves as victims while conveniently leaving out the years of financial dependence and manipulation. Then, it was Colin's turn. His lawyer stood with the effortless confidence of a man who had already won. He walked toward the judge, speaking with measured calm. "Your Honor, let's lay out the facts." He turned toward Adam's parents, his gaze sharp. "Where is the written agreement stating that my client is legally required to provide them with financial support?" Silence. Collins didn't wait for an answer because he already knew they didn't have one. Instead, he continued, his voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. "Why? Instead of adjusting their expenses and living within their means, did they decide that their adult son should function as their personal ATM?" His mother let out a choked sob, but Collins ignored it. "And perhaps most importantly," he added, pausing just long enough to let the weight of his words settle, "doesn't it seem odd that they threw him out of their home years ago, treated him as an outsider, yet still expected him to fund their lifestyle?" Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Adam's parents shifted uncomfortably, their carefully crafted image beginning to crack. His father coughed, trying to regain control. We just thought family helps family." Collins smiled, but there was no warmth in it. So, family only matters when it's time to collect a check." His mother opened her mouth as if to protest, but nothing came out. The judge frowned, clearly unimpressed with their lack of a real case. "Unless you have documented proof that your son entered into a legally binding agreement to provide financial support, I fail to see the basis of this lawsuit." Collins sat back down, satisfied. Adam exhaled slowly, already sensing that the tide had turned in his favor. But he knew his parents well enough to understand one thing. They weren't going to give up that easily. A few days after the first hearing, Collins received an unexpected package at his office. It was an anonymous envelope, thick with documents. The moment he opened it and began scanning the contents, his lips curled into a knowing smirk. It was exactly what they needed. Inside were bank statements from Adam's parents, covering the past few years. The records painted a very different picture from the one they had tried to present in court. Instead of struggling elderly parents barely scraping by, the statements revealed extravagant spending, lavish vacations, designer clothes, high-end restaurants, and, most notably, large sums of money funneled directly to Victoria. The same Victoria who had claimed she was now broke. The same Victoria who had laughed at Adam while his children stood unwelcome at the dinner table. Collins wasted no time preparing these as evidence. If Adam's parents wanted to play dirty, they had just handed him the perfect weapon to dismantle their entire case. When the next hearing began, their lawyer immediately launched into another emotional plea about their supposed terrible living conditions. He spoke of their hardship, their desperate need for financial assistance, the suffering they had endured since Adam had so heartlessly abandoned them. And then Collins stood up. Without a word, he calmly walked to the judge's bench and placed the documents on the table, flipping them open so they were clearly visible. His voice was crisp, unwavering. "Your Honor, here we see a charge for a luxury resort in the Maldives, booked just 1 week before this lawsuit was filed. According to the plaintiffs, this is the same money they needed for bread and milk." The entire room went silent. Adam's mother went pale, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find words. His father sat frozen, gripping the armrest of his chair, as if willing himself to disappear. Collins continued, flipping to another page. "Here, we have thousands of dollars spent on designer handbags and jewelry, followed by several large withdrawals, all transferred directly to their daughter, Victoria, who coincidentally also claims to be broke." The judge frowned, flipping through the documents, his expression darkening. "Plaintiffs, do you have an explanation for this?" Adam's mother stammered. We were just..." "It's not what it looks like," his father interjected hastily, his usual controlled demeanor crumbling. Collins raised an eyebrow, waiting. Their lawyer scrambled, but it was too late. The illusion of helpless, struggling parents had been shattered in an instant. Adam leaned back in his chair, watching the panic unfold, feeling nothing but satisfaction. The truth was finally out. After several exhausting hearings, the court finally delivered its verdict. The judge ruled that the lawsuit was completely groundless, citing the undeniable lack of any legal obligation on Adam's part. But the real blow came when the court ordered his parents to cover all legal costs, including Adam's attorney fees. They had expected to walk away with a settlement, but instead, they found themselves deeper in financial ruin than before. They tried to fight it, of course. They attempted to appeal, convinced that they could drag Adam back into the mess and force him to pay up. But their lawyer, clearly sensing that the case had been a disaster from the start, quietly disappeared. He wanted nothing more to do with them, unwilling to let his reputation be tainted by such a blatant attempt at manipulation. Adam walked out of the courthouse, stepping into the crisp air, breathing deeply for the first time in what felt like years. It was over. Not only had his parents failed to take another cent from him, but they had driven themselves into a financial hole of their own making. They had spent years treating him as nothing more than a paycheck, and now, with that source of money gone, they were forced to deal with the consequences of their greed. The final time they tried to reach out to him, it was through another desperate phone call. His mother's voice was softer this time, almost pleading, but Adam had nothing left to give. "You destroyed this bridge yourselves," he told her, his tone calm, final. "I just don't save people who don't want to save themselves anymore." That was the last thing he ever said to them. For the first time in his life, Adam felt completely free. His real family, the one he had built with Sophia and his children, was all that mattered. There was no more guilt, no more obligation, no more burden placed on his shoulders by people who had never truly cared for him as a son. They had made their choice long ago, and now they were living with the consequences. So what do you think? Do you believe Adam did the right thing by cutting them off completely? Should he have given them one last chance, or was it too late? Would you have handled things the same way, or do you think there was another way out? Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you would have done in his place.